episode 11.
Episode
Well, we got
11
this
already.
this far already.
Jeez. All the statistics. So today we're going to talk about our
How did we
journey.
get into DevOps? Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. It's not sure how long this episode will take actually, but we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, maybe the first 10 years are not very interesting to
It depends on
to
how old you are, I think, because for some people that will seem familiar, and for others
yeah,
it will not say
yeah,
anything.
yeah. But I'm not sure if that has a lot related to DevOps itself. I mean, it probably has something related to IT, like how did we
Yeah,
get interested in IT? And actually,
absolutely.
the well, my first computer when I was, I think, 6 years old was a Macintosh SE. So I think you get like your first computer to get you hooked to computers, internet. Well, not internet, but IT in general. Like.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, internet, no, that wasn't really there yet. No, exactly.
Although I think there was a way very soon after to connect the modem, but it was very
Yeah.
very difficult to very expensive.
Yeah,
To
exactly. Yeah, but you have to pay the
yeah,
phone rates like per minute. That was
yeah, that was
quite
expensive. Yeah,
that was expensive, and you couldn't use the landline anymore to
yeah,
actually
nobody
make a
could call
phone
you
call.
anymore.
Yeah, but that was later. I think
It
it
was in
was
the 90s somewhere in the
yeah,
90s.
exactly,
So,
exactly.
yeah.
It's
So yeah, we were both born in '85
yeah,
to give a reference frame,
the
and
edge
then
of millennials,
yeah, and in the
apparently.
'90s we well, I think actually everything changed once you connect to the internet, because when you have a computer, you just use it to play games and to test a few things. But once you
Yep.
are connected to the internet, it's like, oh, there's all this information. Like you can read how tos and books, and I
Yep.
think that's how I actually first got to read about programming. And if I remember correctly, that was about a C programming language, because back then that was like, okay,
Yeah.
if you want to learn programming, learn C.
Yeah.
Um,
Wasn't that
so
much choice either. Like,
yeah, now, well, yeah, well, like things like basic and all the other
yeah.
things as well,
True.
but still were like, oh yeah, just use C, because that's what is used a lot, which is actually much more difficult to learn nowadays. You can just learn Python,
Hmm.
which doesn't have such a steep learning curve as C. I remember, like, okay, chapter 3 was like pointers, so
Okay.
you don't really have these
No.
with with Python or other languages, and then like pointers, functions. But yeah, it gives you good basics to get started.
Yeah, for sure.
I think, but yeah, programming doesn't immediately bring you closer to anything like internet services. And I
Yep.
think
True.
when going back, um, internet services, like everything that's on the internet, like websites, that's what changed everything. I think that's
Yeah.
how you
The
kind of get
accessibility to it.
into,
Yeah.
yeah, but also that's how you kind of get to um, try to understand how everything works.
Yeah. True.
Yeah,
True. The same for me. Like at some point, like my neighbors across the street were super tech savvy, so they had their father was like a mainframe engineer at a big European bank, and he already had a way of dialing in into the system if something broke, and like with modems and stuff like that. But that was like processors 386, 486, some things like that. So like a real old machines, and then it were like stupid things that so they had I think three computers, and basically when you like the first it's really really stupid, but the first versions of Doom, you were able to play them together over like a network connection with
yeah, yeah,
coax,
yeah,
and then you had to set it
yeah.
up yourself like with IPX, something like that
Yeah, some
in
strange
MS-DOS.
protocol. Yeah,
In
yeah,
MS-DOS, that you had to set that up first, and it was like the commands you start learning, like I have to type this in order to achieve that, but then you start realizing like after I got older and older now, like how does this actually work? And then you start asking questions, and then they also had the knowledge and the literature to show how like but you're actually like starting up this, and this is how the network works. And I was like, whoa, this is amazing that two computers can speak to each other. And you also had like Formula One that you can play like against each other the same way. Also with a coax cable and terminators, because you had to terminate that network was super funny. And then in the later stage, they had a thing like a BBS, like the precursor of the internet, I think it was. Like
Of
you
news
dial,
groups, precursor of news
yeah,
groups.
yeah, bulletin
Yeah.
board services basically.
Yeah.
So you basically dial in into a computer. There were also a limited amount of slots that people could dial in, and then you were able to access some information. Like not all of them very useful, but like it was the first way of like also you had a kind of chat room kind of ish, and I was like, whoa, what is this? So this, I'm dialing into a computer that is like 50 kilometers away from me. It's completely, and I'm talking to strangers in kind of real time. And then basically, internet was just around the doorstep, at least in Europe, like where I was living. Internet providers came around and stuff like that. And then you start browsing the internet, and then like that I always was curious on how the stuff worked, like because they also built their PCs themselves, like buying processors, motherboards, all that stuff. So I was always looking how they were doing that. And then you visit the website, like fast forward a bit, and then you start to think like, how is this possible? And then you start to learn HTML. This? Yeah, and then you start to learn HTML. You already have an idea of the networking. And
how would you learn it? Because now you go and buy a course on Udemy. I remember going to
the bookstore.
Take the bus to the bookstore.
Yeah, to the nearest town. Exactly.
Yeah, buy the HTML book that was like this.
And there were magazines as well.
Magazines.
Clicks magazine, I think the name was.
PC magazine from the Netherlands or something.
Yeah, exactly. And that was like a big source of information. You always get that CD from CompuServe. You would have like hundreds and thousands of those at the end of your 10 years.
I think one of these magazines said like, Linux is this new thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's how I started like looking it up. But that was already the day that I figured out that IRC existed.
Yeah.
Because you can also get a lot of information from IRC, talking to people. They're a bit more tech savvy people that are on IRC. So I think at some point when we had internet, I joined IRC, and then you start experimenting with all these things that you find interesting when you are.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know how old I was, 14, 15, 16, I don't remember. I remember like egg drops or something that we would spend some time on.
Way too much, actually.
Way too much time. Way too much time, yeah. But then indeed, and then there was like one day's magazine that said like, Linux, this new thing. And I was like, huh.
Exactly.
But I didn't have access to install it. I want to install it, but I couldn't get it. And I remember trying to download it using my dial-up. Yeah. Like you had like these downloaders that would be able to resume over FTP. So it took me like a month or two to download it. I downloaded it, burned it on a CD, and actually I got into the installer and everything. But then it said like, there's a RPM, those Red Hat RPM package corrupt, and I was like, something got corrupt and could never get installed. So then I actually went to the same bookstore where I bought this HTML book, and they also had books about Linux with installation CDs.
With that box?
Yeah, like some box with like Red Hat 6 or something, which is not the Red Hat 6. I mean, they restarted numbering or something. It's the Red Hat 6 from, a long time ago. Before 2000, I think.
Yep.
Or around 2000 somewhere. And then you could read the book, and that was quite interesting to learn about Linux. You would get the CDs, you would install it, and you would read a book how to install it. What are the shell commands? What is bash?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, and that would actually give you a lot of information. The only downside that I had was, you would install Linux, but it wouldn't recognize my modem, so I couldn't go on the internet with Linux. I had to wait actually until I had like broadband before I could actually connect my Linux
interesting.
server.
I remember it was a big hassle to get that in order.
With Win modems or something. That was not easy.
Exactly.
But then you also had like what I did at some point was you could have like a router because in back in the day it was like, oh, you have one PC and this one PC can connect to the internet. And then I would have this old PC, and then I would put a diskette in the old PC that would boot some kind of mini Linux that had IP tables, and then that would be your router.
Oh yeah,
then you
exactly.
connect that to a switch. I think it's like Coyote Linux or something.
Yeah.
Connect that to a switch, and then you can add everything to like we can create a home network. And I remember that the internet companies back in the day were saying that it's illegal. Like
Yeah,
you're
you
not allowed
couldn't
to do
share
that.
it. No, exactly.
No
Yeah.
sharing allowed. There's only your license is only valid for one PC. Otherwise, you need some other license or something. Like,
Yeah,
we are doing something illegal here.
What was the name again? It doesn't matter. But yeah. We had the same thing because my brother PC was next to mine, and then the like the old computer, you even had like a modem for DSL that was able to do that, but they limited that thing. So you had to flash new firmware on that DSL modem. It was like an expensive Alcatel modem, I think it was, like with an Ethernet port. And then you basically could flash it with another firmware. And then basically you had a DHCP server on it. But it was in a way later stage. Then we already had broadband.
What I was talking about, we also already had broadband. I don't think we ever shared internet or using the modem because it was just way too slow.
Yeah, it was five kilobytes. Yeah, so if one was, well, yeah, we were with two people who wanted to watch them, and my brother also, he helped a lot in that. So also he
was older, right?
Yeah, he was 7 years older. So he already had broadband access in his school. And then internet at home. So he persuaded my parents that was a useful thing. We should do that, stuff like that. But he back in the day, I also, because I learned how to like install computers, like basically put them together from pieces, the hardware. I started selling them to people in my class, but I was like 12, 13 years old, I think, when I started with that. So it's not very convincing for the parents to be like, hey, I'm going to buy a computer built by a 12-year-old because it looked complex back then. Well, it's still kind of the same thing. So my brother was he financed me basically to
He was your salesperson.
Yeah, see, I'm doing thumbs up again. But no, he financed me to buy the pieces, then took a piece of the profit, but it looked like he built it. Like that was way more trustworthy to be able to sell it, right? But that's I've always been interested in how stuff works, and that curiosity has led me kind of also in that path, I think.
Yeah, I think back in the day we would kind of, like you say, like you would flash the firmware. There would still be this hacker mindset. Like you have something.
Oh, that phone phreaking and all that stuff. Yeah,
let's change it in some way. Let's experiment. You could read on the internet like how to do things, and that was the area. Because I remember also like that was like the time that you would experiment with Linux. You also had these hacking challenges.
Yeah.
That I found somewhere, like a website, and said like, there's somewhere a bug in this website. This is level 1. Find the bug, and you will go to level 2. And then the challenge would always get more complex. And that's like I spent so many hours on that.
Yeah.
So much
bounty
time,
programs, kind of like they're called now, right? Like it's the same thing with. Not that it's the same, but it reminds me of like. So IRC got like. We used it since forever, and then all of a sudden you had like Slack popping up again after so many years of not really using IRC, and then you're like,
I know what this is.
this looks awful familiar. So you see also things coming back that worked well. So that was thing, but also the curiosity was also a thing that you learn how to program. Because it started really like my mom had some recipes, and I found a book about, I think it was Turbo Pascal, something like that. I think it was back in the day, whatever. And I tried to create it myself, but like my English wasn't that good back then, and the book was in English, and I tried to like put pieces together, and then basically you start from there, I think. And the cool thing is. But it's also, we discussed in our previous episode, that how many levels there are of stuff that you have to kind of know, but that we take for granted that we know that is kind of also because of that, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Like it was much more obvious what the abstraction levels were there because we didn't have so many abstraction levels. I
Yeah,
think
when it was an iteration of all skills. Yeah.
there was no button to connect your two PCs. You need to set up this protocol. You're exposed to the protocol, and you have to connect
Yeah.
everything.
To
And
play a
also,
game. That was that was a
to play a
crazy.
game. Yeah, 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 yeah. And then you're just like, I want to play this game, so
That was the motivator.
I
Yeah, yeah,
will.
true.
Yeah, that's a motivator. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. I spent a lot of Saturday evenings playing Doom while I was actually too young to play it, but that's another thing. No, and then also like, we've tried some HTML on your, I think, um,
Netscape. I remember that was still the time of Netscape because then when I was learning HTML, it was like, oh, are you going to use tables to do your layout because then it's still Netscape compatible, or are you going to use CSS and CSS like, oh, this new thing. But then there was
yeah,
CSS, so then I had to buy another book about CSS because the
yeah,
HTML book was only about HTML. Then you had to buy CSS, and then they said XML. XML is the future, so I bought an XML book because XML is the future.
oh yeah,
Uh, and then I started learning. Then I bought a PHP book. That's what
yeah,
I remember.
yeah,
PHP 5, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Um,
yeah, probably.
they would teach you about how to make a web shop in PHP, and then MySQL, and MySQL,
Yeah,
like this database that
exactly.
was like, whoa, you can do like these queries.
That was for me like a catalysator for going from like client side things to like server side things, and then also want
Ah,
to
yeah,
understand how the server side things work, not just
yeah,
pushing. Here is a picture and it goes through the wire and it stands on a disk, but now it's like rendering the content dynamically. It's fetching it from somewhere.
yeah.
Okay, but okay, MySQL it's a database and you set it up locally, put a zoom, and then it works. But then like but I want to run this on a server. How would that work, and what are the consequences of that?
And
And
also, the funny thing is that, well, you don't have a job, or you were not like you
oh
had
no,
limited resources.
yeah, yeah,
So how do you do it? So you look for the most inexpensive way. It's not like, well, now you can make a cloud account for free. Okay,
yeah,
maybe you need a credit card. Sometimes you don't need a credit card, but like back then it was not so obvious indeed. So you
like a
would kind of
digital ocean machine, boom, ready to go.
yeah, you would scour the internet, look
Yeah,
for some free services somewhere that had like FTP access, maybe shell access if you were lucky,
yeah.
to then put your website on. Like that, like yeah, you all the static websites were for free, I remember, but dynamic websites that was not for free. Um,
That is kind of where you jumped in as well, right? Like,
yes, because I remember because I was on IRC and then I found some people that had servers and they said to me, yeah, we have these servers somewhere in the data center. It's like, oh, data center, what's that?
yeah, exactly.
And then we have a very big internet connection, like I don't know, 100 Mbits. I was like, oh, 100 Mbits is like, or first it was 10 and then 100. And it's like, how do you get a server in a data center? Well, you can rent one, or actually, at first they would rent one in the US because in Europe it was much more expensive. And in the US they would have like a data center, like a very cheap something where you would just have desktops and then connect it. So first you could get some account there, which was not even a full server, just an account. But then I figured out like, oh, for like, I don't know, not much, 300, $400, 500 maybe, you could build a server. And then I was like, oh, it needs to be a 1 unit server. And then you could get some parts from somewhere and then someone would build it for me. And then I found some other guys that said like, oh, I also want some account somewhere to run my website on, maybe just to have like shell access to run some tests. So I found like 5 people. Okay, I will buy this server. Uh, let's get it into a data center, and then we'll divide it up in 5. I will manage it, and then we will have our own server to put our websites on, to put whatever on. And indeed, then it kind of starts like, oh, but we need DNS. Like we need a domain name. How does this work? Oh, you need to install DNS server. I need to install that. And yeah, from there you learn a lot of things. And I was still in high school back then, um, so I was already thinking I will go and study like computer science or something similar. But at that point, that was like the what you would get in school was like, here's Excel, here's Word, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
There was computer classes, but it's more like, oh, you can learn how to type without looking at your fingers, you know. And there was a little bit of programming as well, Visual Basic, but that was like really like very like the minimal things. And then back then I was like, oh, but Visual Basic is not very interesting because now everything is website, so why don't we learn PHP?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
That was like PHP. What are you talking about?
It was the same with me in high school. It was I was trying to I was first doing electronics, and then I was not that interested anymore into that. And then I was looking at like computer science, but the options were limited back then. And then I found a school like 60 kilometers away from here or something like that that had like industrial computer science, and I was like, it was like assembler, electronics, Visual Basic, and like programming like those big assembly robots like they have in like factories. I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do. So I did that actually in order to avoid like the Excel and all that stuff, because that was the classical trajectory for most schools was like, you want to do something with computers? Here's Excel and Word and stuff like that. I was like,
the funny thing was actually that the reason why they would do it like that is that the course was actually accounting.
Yeah, exactly.
And IT, or well, what they would call IT.
Exactly.
And it's like, yeah, if you know Excel, you will be a good accountant. If you learn Word, you'll be a good accountant. So it was all aimed like you can become an accountant with now these things that you have learned.
It's just crazy, right? But yeah, luckily that has changed.
But and that was quite interesting. I actually one of the benefits of doing that, and one of the things that I wanted was you would actually get a certificate that you could open a company. Because opening a company, you needed some kind of certificate that you knew like the basics of
like company knowledge certificate. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, back in Belgium. So I needed that because I wanted to start my own company, because I had already a server, and I was like, once I have my company, I can sell more of this accounts, and then I can make maybe a small profit. So I remember the day I was 18, I went to this office to that can do the paperwork
for the VAT number,
for a VAT number and a company number, and then I like immediately there was like a reality check, because they just kind of changed at the government level all their systems. So they told me like, oh yeah, we just changed our system. So normally you would get it in a day, but now we're just changing it. So I don't know how long, and it actually took 2 or 3 months to get the VAT number back then. Oh, they're very, very strange. It's like, what is going on here? But yeah, and then once I got the VAT number, I was like 18 a couple of months. The 18 is like the minimum age in Belgium to start a company. Then I started selling these accounts, like to put websites on, dynamic websites on, like what was it?
Yep.
GSP and PHP and MySQL from a server in the Netherlands. Which are later brought back to Belgium at some point when the prices were better in Belgium. This is already years later. That's how it started. And then that was my side business when I was then doing my bachelor's in, I think, what was it, 2003? Started 2003, yeah. And then you went to the same school. That's how we actually met.
Yeah.
Around 2005, I think, or something, right? Because I didn't met you immediately in the school. I first did like 2 years or something, and then I met you, because we joined. So when I joined the school, I found out that there was like a student organization.
Yeah.
And the student organization would promote free and open software. And I was like, oh yeah, Linux, free, open source, cool. I will join that. And then they were like, oh, we manage these servers here. We also have these accounts, like the same accounts, same shell accounts, because people maybe wanted a website or wanted to program on the server for their courses. So they were managing that, and they were also doing events like workshops, Linux workshop, Vim workshop, Perl workshop, all these kind of things. Yeah. So I joined that, and you joined that one also later,
exactly.
a couple of years later. So that's how we met, actually.
Even building Wi-Fi antennas and cooking workshops
Pringles from a Pringles, yeah, yeah.
from
How to
Pringles
build
can.
an
Yeah.
antenna? Yeah, it
And
was fun.
cooking for IT people. Like
Oh, yeah, that was nice.
that was also a popular one.
Because they had kitchens, because they had some other courses where they needed kitchens. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly for diets and yeah, that's actually how we met through the student affiliation. And then later you became president of that, I think, even.
yeah, yeah.
And then I took over because I liked my high school too much. So I stayed in high school a little longer.
One year longer or something, no?
Exactly. Like
Yeah,
I doubled the year because I switched from electronics to that other and then
yeah.
you had a big gap on math. So I had mathematics,
Yeah.
not the drugs.
uh,
So,
yeah, and the student affiliation, the interesting part was that it was actually promoting free and open source software, which was not very known back then. They were saying like there's Linux, but that's Linux just one part of it. There is this GNU thing, and then there's FOSDEM, which is a yearly event in Belgium that we would go to. So there was a lot of exposure to new things that the students affiliation was doing, and also programming languages, things like Perl. Perl was like big thing back then.
absolutely.
2003, around 2003. Maybe it was already dying down. I don't know.
Yeah, but it was also in the curriculum of the school, I think.
No, I don't think so. It was not in the
Yeah.
curriculum. Actually, that was quite funny, right? Because the curriculum of school back then was, unfortunately, that you still had to learn COBOL.
Oh yeah, COBOL. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
COBOL. I don't know if
Yeah,
did you
still
have
did.
to learn this one? Yeah.
Yep. Well, it was like relatively simple.
In my
Like
time, it was like, we are not teaching PHP. No. We don't know whether that will be
it's not proven tech. No, I
that's
don't know.
proven tech, which I was already doing before I went there. So I was like, okay, whatever. I
Yeah.
already know how to program in PHP. I have a few websites. No. We're gonna teach you COBOL. And back then, you also don't know, so you think like, oh, COBOL, yeah, that must be the thing. That's how we write these business applications.
I got taught PHP. Yeah.
Yeah, but that they changed it because
Yeah,
then it was
exactly.
proven. when I left, it was proven. Yeah. So COBOL, but then also they introduced Java,
Yeah.
also from the first year, and then okay, Java is more modern, and it's crazy that it's still around, so long. I wouldn't think that what you learned back then, like Java, you think IT it goes very fast, but yeah, business software is not going very fast. We're still doing Java everywhere, right? So
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
crazy that we already started. I started in 2003 with Java. We are now 21 years later, and everything's still Java.
Yeah,
that's
definitely.
that's completely crazy. But yeah, that was what COBOL also was. COBOL was like, if you want a good job and you know COBOL, you're gonna have a job tomorrow.
Yeah, you can work in a bank and rewrite the
Yeah.
software. Like because they needed a lot of people during the 2000 Y2K bug.
But then there were a lot of people indeed that want to go to these bachelors to learn about IT, and because there was like a hype, but then it kind of died down a little bit, and then we were like already on where there was a lot less people, but COBOL was still big. And then the interesting part actually is we went to FOSDEM, free and open source. What is the abbreviation stands for?
Development, free and
Yeah.
open source development
M
meetup.
is a strange meetup. Meeting.
Meeting?
Yeah, meetup was not a thing back then, I think. Meeting.
Something like
And
that.
then they said like, oh, you can do your LPI exam for no money, like 50%, 80% reduced or
Yeah.
something. So I was like, oh, LPI, what is that? And then you get your LPI ID, you do the exam on paper.
Yeah, I still have the pencil. Sometimes I find it in my. I have like a junk box, and I throw everything in there that I want to keep, and it's like the LPI pencil.
And that's kind of how it gets more professionalized. You're like,
Mhm.
okay, this is what I need to learn, isn't it? What I need to know to maybe be able to get a job as a system administrator. Like DevOps wouldn't exist back then. Cloud didn't exist. It was still like putting servers in racks, but then you would be a system administration because these things need to be managed. They need to be managed kind
Absolutely.
of as pets, what we say now, right? Now we say, okay, you want cattle, not pets, but that was all everything was a pet.
Yeah, absolutely. It was all custom. You try to not divert too much, and that's where all those strict big corporate IT processes come from, I think. Like to because else like nothing would be the
Everything
same.
same operating system, everything
uh,
same
yep.
packages. Yeah,
Patching goes through all those pillars from development, acceptance, production, all that stuff, um, which kind of absolutely makes sense, right? Like it's super important. But it comes from that because else, yeah, it was no way of doing that, and you learned that.
so
Um,
indeed going back to like our DevOps journey, I think that was kind of the level where I say like, okay, now I can become a system administrator, because I did this LPI. Now I feel more certain that
yeah,
uh,
that I'm actually able to do something.
yeah. There was also system administration courses in the curriculum, but they were like super boring, like very theoretical.
Yeah.
I mean, they are useful in a way, but not really practical, I find. And
Hmm.
I'm sure maybe today I would find it super interesting, but back then I didn't find it very interesting. But then they changed the curriculum when you did your last year, and then they introduced Cisco, right? Cisco
Yeah.
certification,
Yeah.
CCNA,
Exactly.
and that I was kind of mad about that I couldn't get that one,
Yeah.
because that was something that interested me. Like I had a big interest in like, okay, yeah, I know system engineering, but what is going on in this network layer, routing protocols, switching protocols, BGP, and all these kind of things that I had an interest in, but
Absolutely.
couldn't really do. Which I then during my I had an internship, and then I learned a bit about that, and then little by little I caught up. But that's actually, if you want to be a good system administrator, you also should know about networking. That was kind of the thing, right?
Yep.
And
Exactly.
CCNA would be a good like the way to learn about networking.
Yeah, like basic debugging tools, right? Like a ping tracer, all that stuff that you can find.
Yeah, TCP dump, and then what Wireshark, or what was it called, that you would
Wireshark, yeah. You
like
can
see.
intercept
Yeah, I remember. Like, what
with a
was it?
hub
War driving, or what was it called?
with a
That
Wi-Fi.
was. Yeah, with Wi-Fi. What's it called? The word was the war driving.
Bar driving, yeah, with a
Yeah,
laptop in
you would
the.
take your laptop in the car, you would drive somewhere. Oh my god! And then you would put Wireshark on, and then you would see all the unencrypted, because encryption was not a thing back then. You would see all the unencrypted data. I never drove around, but at home I was like, I can just see my unencrypted data. And actually, as a kind of system administrator, I was like, I need to encrypt everything.
Yeah,
I
exactly,
think
exactly.
I think I installed a VPN or something, like some like between the Wi-Fi and the router or something like that. Like I was like, oh, this needs to be encrypted, because now otherwise people can read everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And even with the earliest form of encryption, it was so weak. But yeah, that's
I don't think my VPN was weak, but I got a big performance if I would put the VPN on. Yeah, I had the, what was it?
the
The
standard
first one.
web
Yeah. That's true. But
WEP, I think it was.
nobody, yeah, but before that, nobody was using it. It was just open. You would buy a box, and then there would just be no encryption by default. And I remember there was no Wi-Fi. I was the first person in my neighborhood
Oh
to
yeah,
plug in the Wi-Fi. There was just no Wi-Fi. You would click. There was only one. There was only one. And now you open your phone, and it's like, okay, there's 30 Wi-Fi's around me. No, there was nothing. Yeah.
even Google Cars, like Google Street View, uses it to identify neighborhoods and stuff like that, to pinpoint locations better and stuff like that.
I remember there was
Yeah,
also software that said, now you can join a hotspot if you're there. There's a hotspot. You can go on the internet. You can take your, that's not the phone. That's a laptop. You could take your
yeah,
laptop,
yeah.
and then actually there was also 3G. Then you could put like a card in your laptop, and then an antenna, and an antenna on your screen, and then you would have 3G,
Yep.
which was super expensive.
Super slow as well.
Super slow, super expensive. Yeah. So then I think after I graduated, so now we are like 2006. I had this web hosting company with the servers that was running in the Netherlands. So then I've also met some other people online, actually, uh, and that were doing the same thing. And so I actually decided to merge my company together with another company, and we were actually doing for a couple of years web hosting. So we would just like sell these packages to and domain names to people that wanted to have a website, a dynamic website, because you also didn't have cloud. So people would say, I have a small, would have a small company. I need to run an app. Can I get a server? We would buy a server, we would rent it to them, or they would buy a server and bring it to us, to our data center. We would move everything from. No, actually, at that point, my servers were already in Belgium in some facility. Then we moved them to another facility. And then we would have like a whole rack where we could put, I think, 42 servers or something. But yeah, 42 you could never put because you didn't have the power. Back then, the power was already limiting you of putting it full like one new servers because one server was like, I don't know, quite a high
Yeah.
uh,
The
energy
wattage. Yeah.
usage. Yeah, and I think you had 16 amps or something, and that was the issue or something. And then you have to kind of I remember you had two feeds, two electricity feeds, and then when one feed went down, you would have to switch to the other one. And if you put too many servers, when they boot up, they have a surge, and then everything would shut down if you would put too many servers. So then you could only like, I don't know, put 8 amps, 9 amps, I don't remember, of servers or something, because when they boot up, and then so we had quite a significant amount of servers. I think one or two racks or something when I left in 2009. Because at some point it was just not interesting anymore. It's kind of the same thing
Over and
over,
over.
and
Yeah.
then yeah, and
Completely
then there was
understand.
some new things coming slowly. So like, yeah, do I want to do this for the rest of my life? No, not really. And also at some point the bigger players started to consolidate all these smaller ones. So eventually the company was also sold. But
Yep.
that's where we actually kind of lost contact because
Yeah. Then we drifted apart for a couple of years.
yeah. So what did you do actually after you graduated?
So I started working at a bank. So I had, long story short, um, like I was looking at what I'm gonna do, and then like I was already following podcasts about San Francisco. I was like, that is so cool. I want to go there, without having like known any consequences of what it entails to move, visas, all that stuff. Just an idea of maybe I want to do something like that, like the world's your oyster or whatever. And then I got to know that I was going to become a father, so priorities changed a bit. But I already accepted a job to see like what I'm going to do, whatever, at a bank in Belgium, and I was a Unix engineer basically. So I was responsible for an application that did the stock trading for like a couple of banks together, and I was like on a huge piece of machinery, like it was called an HP Superdome. It was completely like it's like literally, yeah, it's just super big in the data center, and I had two like one in two facilities basically to have some redundancy. And yeah, that's where I basically got to know like it was more Unix than Linux, but like kind of the same things, like automating in Bash, Perl, all that stuff. So I could use that into practice actually, and that was quite interesting. Then I got to manage to lead the team, but I was in another department. It was more of an insourcing of other companies into the IT services of that bank, basically. And I was not that interested anymore. The stock trading was really cool because it was like low latency. It had a lot of challenges. It had to be 24/7, and then all of a sudden I had was responsible for the things of a social secretary, and was like less, not that it was less interesting, but it was less challenging for me. So then basically I was like, I also worked with Oracle, and I was like, maybe I want to do something with that. Like Oracle DBA seems to make a lot of money. Basically, that was the
Oracle
motivation.
is expensive, so
Exactly. So let's do that. Yeah. So I kind of pivoted to Oracle DBA for a couple of years.
well, that what
Um,
year are we now? 2008 or something?
oh no, we're already at 2013 for me. So you have a lot of story to catch up as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I worked in the bank for 4 years, 4 or 5 years, something like that, and then yeah, I moved away to a different company.
Going back to how this helps actually around becoming a DevOps engineer is that if you are exposed to enterprise level procedures
Yeah,
and like how everything works, it all ties back into okay, operations. Like how do you manage it? You need to have procedures. You need to
yeah,
have some kind of methodology to manage all these things, and you learn all these things when you are in a bigger organization. You don't really learn them in a small organization. So when I was in my own company, I was like, yeah, we didn't have a lot of procedures written down. Um, so going back then to 2009 when I left this web hosting company, which was my own company. So I stopped doing. Actually, I continued a couple of years as a consultant there, but I kind of gave up my co-founder role, worked as a consultant, and in that time I actually went to do my master's. I was very interested in economics and business, so I did a master's in that. But I also still want to keep the IT part, so which threw me in a complete different area of IT. Because if you are good in IT and also kind of management, economics, procedure things, you go more in the one of the things you can go into is compliance. So after the master's was 2 years, and then I started internship at JP Morgan in New York. So you have to go to New York.
Nice.
So that was a big jump, I think. And then you, just like you were working in the bank, you would be exposed to procedures and then like how everything works, and that all, I find that all ties back into like the operations part of our job. So when you do, I was in information risk management, so we would go through the certifications. If someone had like ISO certified or SOC 2 or one of these, you had to have a lot of procedures in place. We needed to check these procedures whether they were good enough, change management, physical access, logical access, all these kind of things. But yeah, that gives you a sense of what is necessary within a company on IT level to be in compliance, to be able to build services for example, banks. What are banks looking for when you have a vendor and the vendor wants to deliver some services?
Absolutely.
Not a lot of secrets there, actually. Like when you're not in that world, you have no idea. But once you are there for a couple of weeks, you understand. Like, okay, there's also certifications to become a certified auditor, kind of information risk auditor. There's like also books about that I bought and read. And then that gives you a lot of insights how corporations work, and I think that's really. I'm not saying that everyone should do that, but it gives you a good basis to like knowing kind of how you have to kind of structure a company, not really company, but an organization, like what procedures are necessary, what's on an IT level. I mean, you can just read a book as well. You can just say, okay, if you have to become certified in something, you have to become SOC 2. What is necessary for SOC 2? You will also learn about it. But that's interesting to know that there's so much more than just the technical side. That you also have the controls and you can also document it. So that was interesting to know. But yeah, eventually I also kind of said like, it's interesting to know, but it's not the career path I want to follow. So went from New York to London, but then I left JP Morgan in London to join another startup. So back then, what was really new and hyped was big data. So I went in 2014, I went to a big data startup. So when you kind of went to the Oracle side, I went to the big data side, I think. Hadoop, distributed computing. And that's throughout 2014, AWS was already around. Even when I was in New York, AWS was already around. That really kind of showed me how to do distributed computing, but also how to deploy on AWS. And there's not a lot of tooling around that we have today. Like there was no Terraform. Like Terraform was just new. Like it couldn't do anything. But we were not using it because we were using Chef, for example, even to provision instances. AWS. Even AWS, I think AWS also had a Chef managed service at some point that he now deprecated, I think. Even.
Yeah, luckily. But it's also interesting because like the things that you're mentioning now is the things that you, in the big organizations, a couple of years before that, you already learned the processes on how to do that. But instead of using Chef, you basically had a Word document with steps that you had to repeat to do deploy and whatever. So you kind of like, this the first, in my opinion, like kind of the first DevOps movement as well from an automation perspective, because you started automating things that you were like, if I misclick and miss a step here in this like Excel document or Word document, I screw up the release. Like you were running queries on the database. Next step, log into the database. Next step, run this query. Next step, create a table, drop that table, copy, whatever. And then basically you start to automating those things in shell scripts and stuff like that. So it was repeatable, and you could, like, releases had to happen at 10 p.m. on a Saturday until 6 a.m. at Sunday morning, like in the bank I was working at. So you had to make sure that you didn't need to kind of think about what you were doing. So you tried to automate those things. And then the tooling followed, not in big corporations, because that took a lot longer. Like IBM tried to make some stuff around that and stuff like that. But basically they like the open source communities and stuff like that also saw that, and were like, then Chef came on the surface of the earth and stuff like that, in order to just get rid of the shell scripts eventually as well and make it like in a better way, like so
in YAML with Ansible.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, but it was repeatable.
Yeah.
It was like
Yeah.
that was the main goal, and then you didn't have to follow those boring Excel sheets or stuff like that.
No, but that's indeed it. I think the kind of movement started there with us as well in that startup in London. Like first you click everything together in AWS, and then it's like, okay, yeah, there's an API. We can actually use the API to launch some instances. Now these instances are launched. How do we provision them? Puppet was already around for a very long time. I remember even working with them like a long time before.
My ENS project was that for
yeah?
for the bachelor degrees was with Puppet, because we had like in the slideshow, the first thing was like the mentors liked Metallica, so the first slide was from Metallica, the song from Masters of Puppet, because like we
no,
we already had good points before with our first slide, but that's the thing.
Yeah, so these thing automation, we already kind of did that, just not on that level where we would do it in around 2014-15, I would say. And I think that's when it was more popularized, like this DevOps movement. Okay, it was a few years earlier that it kind of started, DevOps days and all these things. But yeah, there was not a lot of tooling, I remember. Like, and also Chef was a bit clunky as well.
Yeah.
And then they would say like, first you had like a daemonless or something, and then you had there's a server that you have, and then you would have to build the whole server, and then you had actually the managed server version, and then that was actually when there start to be like managed services, like SaaS for infrastructure. That was when things became interesting, I would say, because then people are like, I'm doing operations, but now I don't have to manage all these software on servers of my service, but I can actually use finally some managed service. I will just pay the subscription somewhere, and now I have like only these clients. And that was that model, and that's also a little bit the cloud model, subscription based. That model kind of started changing things, I think. Like you had the cloud, but also the subscriptions, infrastructure software subscriptions that you would then use to make life easier.
Absolutely. It's also around the time that our paths crossed again, because I had to do some Oracle training in London, and I had some budget on getting going to on training. And the first I had to do a certification of some kind. I don't remember how it was called, and I was in London, so I was like,
yeah, and I introduced you to Uber. No, Uber.
Yeah, exactly. That was like, it was magic back then. It was like you press it on your app. I had what was it, iPhone 2, I think. First didn't exist, but I had like the iPhone 2, and then basically you ordered it. I don't have to explain Uber, obviously, but it was like, it felt like magic. There was a guy picking me up, and they only had Uber Black back then, so it was like a big Audi A6.
Guy in a suit.
Yeah, the guy in a suit. So exactly. So he opened the door, put you inside the car, and then drove off. And I remember that my colleagues were sitting at the bar of the hotel, and I was saying, yeah, I'm going to visit a friend. And then I came back like in his big car with a show, and he was like, whoa, who's your friend?
And they would open your door, no? Was like that?
Just have to sit, and they would open it like you're some kind of celebrity. It was amazing.
and they would give you credits to use it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Exactly.
the first ride would be for free, so it's like this guy picking you up for free, opening a door in a
Still
suit.
sometimes come across when you search for keywords. Sometimes I come across in the iPhone photo library. So that was pretty funny. But yeah, then also we got. I was very interested in what you were doing, like Hadoop and AWS as well. I wasn't that super familiar with. I knew it existed and was getting a big thing in the United States, and you saw like a wave coming back to Europe. And I was like, this is interesting. I'm gonna learn more about that as well. So basically, beside the Oracle thing, I started learning AWS by myself. Just also, it wasn't that hard back then because there weren't that many
There was no
services.
services.
Like, it was EC2, S3.
If you look back at the screenshots of how the console looked like, I was like, oh
Exactly.
my god, like it just looked like something from the 90s or something.
Yeah.
But I remember the old Amazon website, like Amazon.com,
Yeah.
like it took also a very long time before they changed that. No, I like when I look back at these screenshots, I'm like, what is that? Did we order from that website?
Like, and that was the thing. And that was pretty funny. Then,
Yeah, EC2, S3, SQS, those were the first services. There was not much more. SNS. I mean, there was obviously there was more because I remember when I was there in London, Lambda came out, and it
yeah.
was like, oh, Lambda. Yeah. And Docker was new. There was no Kubernetes. I mean, there was maybe it already started, but there was no 1.0 definitely.
Oh, no.
Spark was new. Apache Spark was new. Hadoop was kind of before all these new technologies existed. Hadoop was new. There was EMR on AWS, so you just put a lot of instances on AWS. Have three masters, have a lot of nodes, and then run your big data workload on AWS. And then back then we were still running a lot of on-prem. Hadoop was mainly a product to run on-prem.
Yeah, absolutely.
To do calculations, to do ETLs, to do machine learning, even back then, on those clusters. And yeah, there was a need for compute, and then Amazon was there. Wait, but Azure was not there yet. Was Azure? Azure was not there yet. No, is it
No, I don't think
possible?
so. At least not. Maybe it was planned or whatever. But I don't know. I can't recall actually.
Yeah, but I'm sure they were there. It just I don't know why, but everything was like AWS. AWS just had these services like SQS already. That were like okay, you can have these managed services and Lambda then, and not really have to run everything yourself. And I think that was what was more appealing. That was why everyone was like looking at AWS as well. I think, and actually the price was still dropping. That was crazy. Like the price every year, every couple of months was like, oh yeah, this got cheaper. You don't see that anymore now.
And the object storage, especially in the big data space, that you could just like offload a lot of data, put in S3. That was also, and that doesn't need to be on disk somewhere or whatever. That was also a big thing
We
back
would
then.
still have these clusters would run on not SSD when they would run on
Oh,
just
yeah,
spinning disks.
HDD,
That was cheaper, and then Hadoop was also built for spinning disk.
for
Um,
sure.
yeah,
Yeah, and then I think it was around that time as well. I experimented with a couple of times with it, and then I think we didn't we find our first client back then. So somebody reached out to me because I was tweeting about AWS and was like, "Hey, do you know AWS?" I'm
yes, we started doing those are side business. When I was still in London, and then you were like, okay, we can set up AWS for you.
yeah, exactly. I think that was the first client. We didn't have something incorporated yet, actually, together back then. I think
No,
we were just
no,
like, yeah,
but
but yeah, let's try.
yeah, but we set up something very
Yeah,
small, but I don't think it was anything big or anything. It was just like, oh yeah, this could actually work. And I think we started to have discussions then like we could we could do this,
yeah, exactly.
but then it still took some time because I was still in London. I was still actually at that time I was giving big data training, so I was also away a lot. I would go
Oh
like
yeah,
to I don't
all
know,
over
I
the
would
world.
all of the world literally to give big data training because back then it was like kind of a global thing. It's like there were not so many trainers, so I had to go to San Francisco one day, and I actually it was like I had to go to Seoul in South Korea to give a training, and then like, oh, but they also can you also give a training in San Francisco because you're already traveling anyway. So I would then go like around the world because then I would fly more east, and then oh yeah, I'm in San Francisco, and then I would fly east again, and I would be back in London. So in 2 weeks'
Already in the
time, I would actually
neighborhood,
just,
kind
yeah,
of, yeah. Like,
yeah, I was already halfway. Actually, not really, but
no, no, the
yeah.
contrary.
So that was quite funny, and because yeah, big companies, enterprises want to know about this technology, and then
Yeah,
indeed,
definitely.
it was not really a side business. It was more like a proof of concept, I would say. Like, oh, this is like, oh, Leos consulting, yeah, that could work. But you first joined another company first. No, you first went to
Yes.
join Spark Central.
So it was in the same time frame actually, because I was quite vocal on Twitter back then about AWS. Somebody reached out to me. I was like, "Hey, we're looking for a DevOps engineer for our SF-based startup. So we're expanding to Belgium as well. So it was a Belgian guy, Davy, and he said like." And he founded a company called Spark Central in San Francisco. And I was like, yeah, we're going to come to Belgium because then we have two HQs basically, so we can expand in Europe. We have a team here, a team there, and we need a DevOps engineer. I was like, oh yeah, it's a bit mind blown. San Francisco, to circle back to the beginning of our conversation, like what I wanted to do in 2008, kind of around that period. And I was like, oh wow, this is like discussed it at home. Everybody was like, yeah, thumbs up. Now it doesn't give the overlay of a thumbs up, but whatever. And I was like, yeah, let's do that. Basically, like also they weren't very familiar on how doing like how to give you a wage and stuff like that in Belgium. They also still had to figure it out, but I was like, well, we'll figure it out, no worries. So but everything was it was okay. Yeah.
Jump on a plane and
Exactly, and then jump on a plane, go to the San Francisco Bridge, like take the Uber, go to the Golden Gate Bridge, and I was like, yeah, finally here. And then like then AWS became my main priority. I already had some experience with it, but I wasn't like super experienced yet. I did a couple of projects and stuff like that, but also like I said, weren't that many services that you could choose from. So
no, it's not like it
so
was today, right?
exactly, and also it was like basically used as a like a like server provider basically. So they all had paths, nothing automated. Everything was like clicked together, and basically then I went from Oracle DBA to experimenting with AWS and getting our first proof of concept client to full-fledged DevOps engineer living in the center of the happy wave of AWS basically.
Even today, like an app. Okay, you already had microservices, but like database would be so important, and it was like then you had RDS. A lot of people were not on RDS yet. This was actually quite important skill to have to, like, if you know about databases, you have to do this migration, you have to do high availability, maybe even before RDS.
Yeah. Oh, that's maybe also important. Like the Oracle DBA was not solely Oracle DBA. It was like in the DBA team because I was also responsible for MySQL, SQL Server, not that much, and MongoDB. So it was MySQL, MongoDB, and Oracle, basically what I was doing. So it was not full only Oracle that I was doing, but was like a small part of it was MySQL. And that was also super important, like you said, because you had a self-managed MySQL with self-managed backups and all that stuff, which apparently didn't always work, but that's a different story. With a slave that then would do the backups and then disconnect and then do a consistent backup, because there was also some magic that needed to be done back then. And then I was like, yeah, let's move to I think we first moved to Percona Galera cluster to make things easier. And then you have like 3 master nodes that could redundant with a HA proxy in front of it. So that was pretty crazy actually, to manage the growth of the company. And then you all like it were always like those projects that you had to dive into and use all your skill sets in order to like and you try to set it up with Ansible, stuff like that. That was pretty fun. That was I really enjoyed that time of like building stuff.
Yeah, it's very interesting if you're in a startup that actually is growing, and where you, as a infrastructure person, have to kind of follow. Well, if you cannot build out the infrastructure, the app will just stop working at some point. So
Uh-huh. And it's your problem because you're the DevOps person.
yeah, to make sure that it can scale, and those are the interesting problems. If you are in a company that is actually in like
Yeah.
getting more users, scaling the user base, and then you have to
And
scale
like
all
we
this.
need more service, more service, more service, and then load balancing, and then yeah, like LB came around, stuff like that. So you were able to offload that to AWS, and then more and more things you were started to be able to go to managed services.
The beginning days of AWS was like you would run everything yourself, kind of on EC2s, and every time there was a reinvent, it's like, oh, we can do this managed, we don't have to manage it
Yeah.
ourselves anymore. You
Phew.
offload it, okay, you pay a bit more. It's like, indeed. And then at the end, so many years later, you kind of don't have to manage anything anymore. Everything is now managed for you. I'm not saying anything, but
Yeah.
compared to what we had to do the years prior, it's like
Yeah.
the system engineering skill set was so much more important because you had all these technology that you would have to manage, you had to know about, that could kind of give you an error at some point, and you have to
Yeah.
investigate. And now that's you're a different abstraction layer. Now AWS has already built those technologies as managed services, and then your job is just kind of to manage them. Yeah, because it is indeed also still a good thing that you don't have to manage all these things. And now, okay, maybe also you would need less operations people in your team too, because you have less technologies to manage. You can actually um, do a lot of things yourself, using a lot of different technologies, because you don't have to go and do deep dive anymore, because they are now managed by AWS, or part of it is managed by AWS.
And also do more useful things.
Do more useful things. Yeah. Yeah.
Who enjoys doing apt-get updates or whatever, like
Yeah.
of important web servers, like if this goes down, like production is broken, like stuff like that.
Yeah. I remember going back to the days where you put servers in racks. There was so many single points of failure. So many. Like you were like, and then if you have an idea of what you set it up so you have an idea of what it is, and there's so many, like, if this fails, we are in trouble. If this fails, we are in trouble. And back in the day, it was like, if there was a hardware failure that you couldn't immediately solve, you would have to get into your car, drive to where the servers are located, get an access code or badge in or whatever, and walk through the rooms, and then open the rack, and then
Roll
press
the
a button.
table with the screen on it, connect a screen and a keyboard to it, and then see what is actually going wrong. Same with doing remote changes.
Yeah, pressing the button was not really the issue, because I remember you could like power cycle the
Yeah, yeah,
servers, right?
yeah.
So it was like, can you access the server? No. Let's power cycle. No. Okay, there's something wrong with it. Drive. Okay, there's a hard disk failure or something. But not even a hard disk failure, because then if it was RAID, so that wouldn't really be the issue. What, like, there was so many
Memory,
issues, like
CPU.
overheating, or indeed, like, what could it be? Like
Absolutely.
I I once had a server, and I would open it for the first time, and it crashed, and the hard disk was not screwed on the chassis. So that, because back in that day, indeed, it would go to some kind of company that would put everything together. Like, okay, you had a motherboard. They would come like in a server chassis with motherboard on it or something, and
Yeah,
you would
yeah.
still have to. But yeah, that was before hot swap.
Like micro surf. No, how is it called? The brand
Supermicro, and that's
Supermicro.
so funny. I forgot about the name completely. Like, we would have Supermicros a lot.
Yeah.
Like,
Still today, they're being used a lot.
haven't you seen the stock price in the last month or 2 months?
Ah, no, not really.
Oh no, you should check it. So Bloomberg reported on it. It's like, okay, you have Nvidia AI wave, but
Oh
Supermicro is
yeah,
also
yeah, yeah.
going on this AI wave, because they are supplying the hardware and the machines, and it's completely crazy. I literally, for 20 years or something, I didn't go to the Supermicro website, and I was like, know this company. It's like, where does it come from? Uh, but I think the stock went down a bit because people were like, maybe not. because they just build hardware. I mean, it's definitely necessary, right? But um, yeah,
Yeah,
maybe
definitely.
they would not really follow Nvidia because Nvidia is really like building, making the chips, the GPUs. I don't know. I don't think Supermicro does make the any GPUs. They just assemble everything and sell it, right? So yeah, Supermicro. So where are we now? Yeah, so we kind of both now have all these uh
Experiences and
experience from from different industries. I think that is the most interesting part. If you're like in DevOps, it's like the more exposure you have to all these different parts. Like, oh, you are a DBA, or like in DevOps, if you are a DevOps engineer, or you're in operations, or you're a cloud engineer, or whatever. If you come from, you often come from another, because often it's like a more senior job, so you often come from somewhere else as a DBA, as a developer. So you bring something to the table. That's always what I find interesting. If you come from a different background, you bring something to the table that your colleague doesn't, was
yep,
never exposed to.
definitely.
Maybe your colleague was a developer, or was in audit compliance, So, and together you kind of have all these different background to solve problems, to give your insight, because whatever role is in this kind of dev space, that is not a developer itself, it's not only about automating. It's not only
No,
about
no, no, true.
provisioning on cloud. There is indeed like it's still this um, organizational changing the organizational structure in a way to have like short feedback loops. Like a lot of the things that you want to implement are actually not very technical, but there are technical solutions to do the actual implementation of what you want to achieve. And that's what I find interesting. That's why it's so interesting to have people from different backgrounds in this role, and it makes it a good fit.
And not only that, you bring a lot to the table, but also um, because you know so much about a lot of topics, you're also sometimes like a bit of the catch-all of like, where are we going to put this? So that's where the flexibility and the eager to learn has to come in as well, because there will always be things that fall through the cracks, and that's all of a sudden not your problem, because I don't want to call it that way, but it's something. Let's say, oh, we need a VPN, like, but you don't have an, you know what I mean, like those things, and that was
Yeah, in small companies, right? Not in bigger
yeah,
companies, you maybe it's more part of a network team, engages with some kind of
yeah,
vendor.
exactly.
But yeah, in smaller companies, you're like, oh, how do we access your service that you just put up?
That's also what
Um,
trickled my ADHD brain to like a lot of stimulus, like a lot of change, a lot of. It's not like a DBA optimizing query like stuff like that, and which is enjoyable for some people, but not for me that much. And then basically, we already are now getting close to the like founding
when we founded
infra IT, right?
Friday, yeah. So in 2015, I think I said, okay, big data. I I'm more interested in again infrastructure, which goes then back actually to putting servers in racks, but instead of putting servers in racks, it's you deploy on AWS. So I was like, I want to do something cloud DevOps instead of big data. But then I was like, am I going to join another company? So I didn't really know what to do, and at some point I was like, let's just go back to Belgium. I mean, uh, I've I wouldn't say I've seen it here in London, but then I was like, London is very expensive to start your own company. So I was like, if I'm gonna start my own company, don't need any funding. I just want to bootstrap it. Let's spend some time in Belgium. Super cheap to live compared to London, so I have a long runway, and I will figure out what I will do. Um, so I think May 2015, uh, came, went from London to Belgium. Didn't know anything what I like vaguely. Yeah, maybe something with cloud DevOps, but I didn't really know what to do. And then kind of spent 6 months a year doing lots of different things. I was still giving some training, some big data training now and then as a consultant. And then we started meeting. We want to do something. Let's incorporate a company that we can do some work together. So we did that. But then I was also interested in okay, I did this big data training, but you have to repeat always yourself. And like, I
Yeah,
started doing training to get the ALS certification, and then I was like, oh, people are doing online training. So it's 2015, right? online training. I can do online training. So then I started doing online training of cloud and DevOps topics and big data topics because I was like, I know all this information. How easy would it not be to just say, like this, like what you need to know to start becoming a cloud engineer or to work
The hard
within
skills,
DevOps
basically. Yeah.
space, the hard skills, yeah. So then, actually, my first course was just like how to get into DevOps. What is DevOps? What are the technologies that we used? Chef, uh, Puppet, Ansible. I think those were the main, like software development lifecycle. And then Docker was new. I mean, not super new, but it was there. Kubernetes was there, but it was also almost not used because it was, I think, just the 1.0 came out just then or something. So I had like very small topics on that. Uh, and then I was also doing some consultancy here and there just to see in also in big data space, still in Hadoop, from Belgium. And then I actually saw the training taking off, and I was like, oh, that seems to be really a demand for cloud DevOps. Actually, that's mainly DevOps, maybe
Kind of an
a little bit less
understatement,
cloud.
but
Yeah, yeah. Back in that day, Udemy would still send you emails for every person that would enroll in your course. So I would put the first course online in November or something. Then I would still do consulting, so I was at the client, and then I would check my phone, and I was like, all these emails suddenly in January, I think. I was like, are these all enrollments? And indeed, they were all enrollments in January. They did like this big promotion, Udemy, like, oh, it's a new year, you should learn a new skill. And then so many people like, oh, DevOps, DevOps, DevOps. And then I remember, like I typed in DevOps in 2015 on Udemy, and I was like, I was nothing. I was
no,
like
exactly.
one of the first courses. So then I did a Terraform course, Kubernetes course, 2016, I think it was. And then we also started working together more. First clients in consulting, so we did both the training, online training, and the consulting. Um, I got my ALS certificates because I was also on Udemy doing the ALS certificates. And yeah, it kind of all kickstarted from there. We got some bigger clients at some point, all from the US, and then it was us in the plane again to,
Yep.
to, to the US to talk about Istio and Docker and ECS and all these technologies. So yeah, then we actually started working together, and now uh, then that's when was it 2021. I moved again back to the US for to work on those US clients, and this is our situation now. Right, so we still run the consultancy company. We still have the online training. A little bit of less of online training, I would say, than back in the day, because now there's so many more players. That's why you start our podcast.
Exactly. Exactly.
Indeed. Why, like, okay, you have the training, but podcasting is so much more interesting. Also, I mean, not. I mean, for us, it's also interesting.
I hope for the people listening as well or watching, but
Yeah,
nevertheless.
well, I mean, it's like the training, making the training is not very interesting. It's like it's a grind. It's like every day recording, cutting, recording from 1 month, 2 months until you have a training ready. And then you don't know whether it's going to be successful. So you have to work for 2 months and then you put it out and hope that you have enrollments. So we had like good courses, but also had courses that didn't have many enrollments or that are very difficult to
But
support.
it still brought a lot of value to the people who actually needed it. But it's like you said, some things that were so moving so fast that it's hard to support them in a training, like especially a training like that, because
Like a Spinnaker
like
course.
Spinnaker, yeah, exactly. Like
Yeah, it
uh,
didn't become a Kubernetes. It's more like, yeah.
it was broken for so long that like I don't know which service it was. The install would break and they wouldn't fix it. It was like, yep, that's basically it. And it was a pull request open and like the some Debian package moved away or whatever. And yeah, they didn't care to replace it. But then you're providing support to a training, but you have to say, yeah, but it's not our fault. It's like the actual project is broken, but a lot of people are interested because they hear about it. And yeah, that was not easy. But like, yeah, that kind of summarizes how we
And then, like, also in the beginning, we did everything ourselves, and now we are more working on an architecture level. I would say, where we actually have cloud engineers that work for us, that do the actual kind of work, the implementation. We do more architecture level, or also some troubleshooting, maintaining some code, best practices, modules, Terraform modules, and so on. So yeah, maybe in general, the technologies that we use now is we are very much focused on AWS. Terraform we use a lot. Kubernetes where necessary, but more a fan of ECS. Like we did some videos on that as well, like some podcasts episode on why we think ECS is probably a better fit than Kubernetes in most cases, not all cases. Big data technologies we also use, but now it's more like Spark in packaged in a AWS service Glue. With S3 as a storage backend, not really Hadoop. We're trying also to still get rid of the Hadoop clusters that are running that we didn't even build. Like they were set up so long ago that you still want to get rid of and use something else like HBase. Yeah, you can migrate all this stuff to managed services. So we are still working on that. It's not like you would think, like from a bystander point of view, it's like once AWS comes out with the managed services, oh, it's like now use the managed services. But now we are 10 years later than these managed services came out, and we are still like, well, we are still running some instances that nobody wants to log into anymore because everyone's scared that they will break something, and we still need to move it to a managed service.
And then I was watching a YouTube video a while ago, and it was interesting that you mentioned it because now AWS starts charging you for outdated services that you're running, like that you need to upgrade them. And it was like somebody making, which kind of makes sense, but I found it interesting. He was making a point that like if you install it yourself on your own hardware, like in your data center, you can keep running it forever, like on that version. Yeah. And then I'm like, but do you really want to do that? It's kind of a good way that they incentivize to move forward but obviously then the application needs to be changed and stuff like that. But you're talking about a lifespan of, I don't know, like Postgres, it's like 10, 15 years. Maybe it's time that you move the application to a newer version, right?
Maybe with databases which are so deeply embedded in the whole application, it's not really a big issue. But I see the issues with something like that can have security flaws because things are not maintained anymore. Libraries are not maintained anymore. Something that has a lot of libraries and you don't know what libraries they are. And that's often difficult to find and to know about. So it's often an unknown in a company. You are running this old Hadoop cluster. Well, is maybe something still exposed somehow? Like think about this log4j bug, right? Can something be exposed in some way that it can be suddenly pose a risk, a security risk? And that's why it's indeed interesting to when you're still paying AWS all this money, it's still supported. If there's a security bug, AWS guarantees that they will fix it. They will patch the RDS, Postgres, and you don't have that certainty if you indeed run something yourself. It's completely end of life.
Absolutely. But I'm going to kind of cut you off here because that's like we discussed it before recording the show. That's for our next episode. So we're going to continue. Indeed. Like it's a nice flow transition to...
We can just like the next episode is exactly going to be about managed versus unmanaged.
Exactly.
So we can just continue
seamless transition.
Our discussion. Yeah,
seamless transition. Okay, let's make a mental note. Okay, I always wear these kind of shirts, but then we can just cut and
wear the same shirt and then as if we did it in one. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And okay, we'll speak soon about that topic. I think that summarizes
that was our journey.
Kind of our journey, yeah.
Yeah.
So I hope people enjoyed it. That's it from my end. Thanks for the chat, Edward, and let's see each other soon.
Yeah, next week, and then we will talk about managed versus unmanaged.
Exactly, and open source versus closed source, I think as well.
Yeah.
Because that goes kind of hand in hand as well.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
All right.
Take
care.
See ya. Bye.